Welcome to Elementary, Mondays at 6. So thank you so much for joining me today. Today I have a couple of topics I'm going to be talking about, and when is the right time to estate plan? That's number one. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about cottages. Seeing that it's summer, it's a good time to talk about cottages. Are you on edge because your mortgage is coming up for renewal? That's a hot topic. And then we're just going to touch briefly on the market conditions and where we stand currently. So, when is the right time to estate plan? So, I would say having a will, estate planning, they all kind of fall into place together. And a lot of us think, oh, I'll just get to the will. But you never do. Or you think at some point, we'll start planning. And then you do a will, and I don't want to say it's half-assed, but you haven't thought of it fully. You haven't navigated. And at every stage of your life, for sure, things will change. When you're 30, you may be thinking, well, I don't really have as much. At 40, you might have a bit more. You have a home, you have a family, you have kids, and all the more reason why you need to have a will. And then let's say, then you have a cottage, perhaps. And so let's talk about cottages while we're in there. Let's segue into cottages and talk about, is a cottage a good financial investment? And I don't think people really think too much about the investment piece of it. They just say, well, I want a cottage. It'll be great for the summer. I'll have a place to take the kids. And but they don't realize they have a home, and now they have another home that they have to maintain and pay for and pay property tax. And so there's all of these other things that happen when you have a cottage that you have to be mindful of. But most important is when you pass away, and I don't want to sound all morbid and stuff, but when you get older, let's say older or not, or when you pass away, the cottage is really not your primary residence. It's subject to capital gains. And as you know, we've got some changes to capital gains. And if we did have changes, either way, it's subject to capital gains. So what does that mean? It means that you'll be hit with the tax on it. So some people say, well, I can rent my cottage out and make up some money, and it won't be as expensive if I decide to rent the cottage. And I'm not talking anyone of you out of, buying property, right? But just make an informed decision. That's all I'm saying. But, these days, owning versus renting, and renting comes with a whole host of problems on its own by itself, especially in this day. And then if you are buying it as an investment property, and you're doing short-term rentals, you have to make sure you're following all of the rules in order to take advantage of the tax deduction. And if you're not complying, then obviously, you may lose out on some of that. But then I have people that ask me, and I'm not giving anyone legal advice, that's what I'm going to tell you, that if you have questions with regard to cottages, putting someone else's name on it. Like, for example, let's say you're getting older and you decide, hey, I have this cottage, I want to put my son's name on it, my daughter's name on it. I would say get legal advice. Get good legal advice, tax advice, and figure out what's more important, right? I would say there are a lot of, things that could happen. And I would tell you to get advice and not just make that decision without the advice. So probate fees are among the highest, absolutely 1.5% that you would have to pay. But capital gains is a lot more. So if you're not playing your cards right, you could be hit with quite a few. So for example, let's say your cottage, you've sold your primary residence. You didn't pay capital gains because your primary residence is exempt from capital gains. But then you move into your cottage, and now you could probably get your cottage as your primary residence, at least for a portion of the time, right? And but if you put somebody else's name on it, that becomes a little different, right? Because it's no longer your primary residence; it's a person's. If you put your son's name, your daughter's name, it would be capital gains. So just get some advice on this. It's a very slippery slope. And then I've heard some other horror stories on, for example, let's say you have your kid's name, and for some reason he has a judgment or she has a judgment, and they run into some issues. Your property could get hit with that judgment, and you might have to sell it or somehow pay for it because there would be a lien on it, right? Based on the judgment. So those are some things for you to be really, really mindful about, whether you're adding a name or it doesn't matter what you want to do with it. All I'm saying is, before you do what you decide to do, get some legal advice, get some tax advice, so on and so forth. The other thing is, sometimes parents think, well, as kids, like when we have a bunch of kids, let's say your parents had like 5 kids, and they decide, hey, we had such good times at this cottage, and I want to leave the cottage equally dispersed to each of the kids. And I think, they haven't thought about it further, but equal ownership is not always successful, right? Sometimes a cottage is great for, first of all, like I mentioned, there's, capital gains that they could get hit with. But most importantly, who makes the decision on the cottage? Who makes decisions? Who pays the taxes, the fees? Who does the maintenance? And then all your kids might have different situations, right? So some may be okay. Some of them could very well afford all of this, and some may have it hard to pay the kind of money. Then the other part to it is that who's allowed to be at the cottage? Is it just the kids or their friends, and how much time? So it gets very complicated. So all I'm saying to you is, when you decide you want to put people on a cottage, on a property, go see a lawyer, go see a tax accountant, go see a real estate lawyer, go see a I don't know who else, estate planning, whatever, lawyer, guy, girl. Go see any of them and figure out your best decisions on these, because it could be very, very, like I said, a very slippery slope you could be on, and you may not even know it, and you may think you're doing a great job by adding all these people and trying to share the cost and the whole 9 yards, but it may not always work out that way. So moving on, the second topic I wanted to touch on was, are you on edge with mortgage renewals? And for the most part, I think you get 2 types of people who pay very close attention to their mortgage. They understand all of the details about their mortgage. And then you get some others who are, life is busy, life happens, you're lifing away, and you've got this renewal that sneaks up on you, right? And now you're like getting a little weirded out, because you're like, oh my goodness, I was at like a 1.9 or 1 who knows, under 1 or 2% interest, but now you're renewing at like 6 and more. So people don't understand that, like when we talk about the Bank of Canada rate, that's the rate the Bank of Canada lends money to the banks. So more than likely, you're not getting that rate. It's not going to be 4.75 for you, unless the bank is going to give you like a 4.75 rate just to, you know, break even for a couple of for the first year, and then hope that the rates drop and as time progresses. So right now we're looking at 5 plus, some even 6, depending on where you are. So it's really, really important to have, you know, to be in good standing with paying your mortgage, to have good credit, to have all of those in check so that you can get the best rate possible when it comes time to renew. And don't wait till the last moment. If you've had missed payments, if you haven't been paying your mortgage, those are all like red flags. So those are things for you to keep, be mindful about. And if you've had any of those situations, like start planning early. There's nothing wrong with starting, you know, a good time to really start talking about your mortgage is 6 months before, because that's where you can get away, and the penalties are not as much. So some of my clients were coming to me saying, hey, you know, I was thinking of like selling my home or buying. And then I had to, you know, talk to them about, hey, what's it going to cost you for this, for the penalty to break it? Let's go find out from the bank. If you still have 2, 3, 4 years left on your mortgage, you may want to think about the penalty. You may want to ask the bank, hey, what's my penalty if I break my mortgage today? So you kind of get the understanding of how much money you have to clear to make it worth your while if you are planning to do this. But if you're just like on edge because you have a mortgage renewal coming up this year and you know you're not sure, start early. Be prepared. The best thing I can tell you is to be prepared in this market so that you don't get the rug pulled out from under your feet. You have to live somewhere, right? And so this is what I tell people. If you're going to rent, well, unless you're renting like an apartment, even those are expensive these days. But if you're renting someone's condo, the rent that they are asking for is what they are going to have to cover the mortgage, right? And so it's a mortgage payment too. So that's why rents are so expensive, because they've been hit. And so all I would say is be prepared, do your homework, work in advance, so instead of waiting for 6 months prior, start at like maybe the 9 to 12 month mark. You know, when you start getting into month 10 before your renewal, start to look at your options, start to figure out, hey, what do you think I can renew at? It doesn't mean you have to renew. You just have to talk to the bank and say, what do you think you can get me? Now, the banks probably won't talk to you till you get to 6 months, but what I would say is go to a mortgage broker so that they can get different products in line for you and give you some ideas as to what you would qualify for and what your payments would be. Some people are seeing between $700 to maybe $1,200 more than what they're paying. So if you're paying like $2,500, $700 more, it's quite a bit of money. $1,200 is even more money. It depends what rate you're going to get and how much mortgage you have. And I know some people who are constantly adding, like they're using their mortgage as an ATM. They keep taking out, and it's not a good idea to go buy a new car and put on your mortgage, because the mortgage is amortized differently. So the calculation is done differently. And so it costs quite a bit of money for that payment. Now, there are also things for you, and this is not a mortgage, I'm not a mortgage person, I'm not giving you mortgage advice. All I'm telling you to do is get some information. Now, there are different types of mortgages also. There's fixed, there's variable rates, and then in the variable itself, there's a static payment where you just pay the same rate no matter what happens in the market. And where we're seeing a lot of problems is where people are just paying a static payment. And like, so for example, let's say the rates went up and you were paying $2,200, but the rates went up and your interest is like $2,100. So you're only putting $100 towards your principal, and most of it is going towards interest. And so you'll never get rid of that mortgage. So you need to understand really what you have, what you're paying, and what you're looking to get into. So you're well aware of your situation, and then you take the best, you make the best decisions. So the third topic we're going to talk about, so we're going to talk about market conditions, and I'm just talking about the Greater Toronto market and what's happening. And it is a buyer's market, and as much as we may not want to come out and openly say it, I mean, this is my opinion, so you might have a different opinion, but it's my opinion. And so my opinion, we're in a buyer's market. We have a flood of inventory out there. And what I'm noticing is that the first-time home buyers have been priced out of the market. So they're virtually nowhere to be found. And investors, on the other hand, have also kind of are a bit silent because, you know, the rates are so high. And so, I mean, listen, investment is a business, and there has to be two options. So one option is that you're cash flowing and that you're not putting in money to sustain your investment. And the second one is, if you are putting in money, the prize or the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow has to be pretty large for you to put in money so that you can get back that and some, right? So so just calling yourself an investor doesn't really make you an investor. You have to really know what you're getting into, what you're buying. And every time the market dips, you can decide you want to fold, right? You have to hang on to it, because that's what real estate is about. Things will dip and then they'll come back, and you'll have your turn. But I think if you're looking to sell when the market is a bit sticky, then you're not going to get that kind of money on your investment. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, of course, the condo market is suffering in the GTA. There's an influx of condos, new condos, and a lot of people are looking at new developments. And I mean, it's a gamble, really, right? When you can buy something on the market for, I mean, why would you pay $1,600 a square foot for a new development when you can buy something that's maybe a couple of years old and still has a decent value, probably in the same neighborhood that where you're looking to buy. So these are all sort of things where I think it's like people get caught up, like, oh, I can just hang on, I can just buy this property and wait 4 to 5 years while this property is getting built, and hope the market is good at the tail end of it, right? And so those are chances you take. But what I want to say to you is buyer beware, right? You know, I have people who will go into a sales center by themselves, and they say, well, you know, the sales guy didn't tell me. And you know, then you have to really say to a person, well, you went there, you ought to know what you were signing. No one has to tell you. They work for the builder. They're going to sell you. You came to buy. Their job is to sell. Their job is not to, you know, turn you away. Their job is to sell you a product. So they're going to sell you the product. And you have to understand the product, and if it makes sense for you, before you decide to buy it. So take someone with you. You know, get yourself a good realtor that you trust, and that you can really count on to give you the straight goods on stuff. I mean, I'll say to my clients, look, I know you're going to buy a property. I'm just going to tell you the truth of it, and you can decide whether you want to buy it or not and take on that risk. But that's what you need. You need someone to just give you the straight goods on it, and you decide whether you want to buy it. And sometimes people will take on the risk. So be it. The last thing I want to mention is that, you know, when we have changing markets, it's really, really tricky because sellers are still stuck in that market with multiple offers and people, you know, buying their house before it even, you know, before the ink dried on their signature, right? And But that's not the market we're in today. And unfortunately, that's not the market we're in. So if you're just here to test out the market, I would tell you, don't do it. Don't waste your time. If you just want to test it and say, oh, I'll sell if it brings me this money, it's not. If you're, this is not the market for that. This is the market where every house has a price, but at the tail end of it, it really comes down to what a buyer is willing to pay for your house. It is a buyer's market, and what I'm finding is some sellers right now are haven't caught up with where the market stands right now. And I understand it's a bit of shock, right? Because we've been spoiled for a little while. But if you want to sell, this is the price right now. However, the other thing I'm noticing is something that I hadn't seen in maybe at least 5 years or more is power of sales. And so we're noticing more and more of that come in. And that's why I touched on, if your mortgage is coming up for renewal in the next little while, how to be ahead of that and not bury your head in the sand, like work towards it right now. At least 9 months away. Like the banks will tell you what they can give you or not at the 6-month mark. But, you can always go to a mortgage broker and find someone who's really good at this and can tell you what sort of rates they can get you and what your payments would be. You have to live somewhere. I don't believe in gambling with a house or a place you live. And renting is another option, but there's no guarantee, right? Your landlord can decide they want to rent, and the person buying it may decide they want to purchase this home for themselves. So it doesn't matter how great of a tenant you are, something like this could happen. So all I would tell you is be prepared every step of the way. This too shall pass, and we'll get back into greener pastures for sellers and of course buyers. All I would say to a buyer is it is a great time to buy. Like there's so much to pick from and it's a great time to buy. So it's always a great time to buy depending on your situation, right? Like some people will say, well, how do you say it's a great time to buy when the rates are so high? And for example, I'll give you an option. There was a builder that was selling homes. They had sold all of these homes, and then I was noticing all of these homes were coming up on the market, and the sellers were really willing to leave their deposits on the table and walk away and just go at that loss. So for this other set of homes were about $200,000 deposits. And they were willing to leave their $200,000 or $250,000 behind, so that hoping that someone else would buy it and they wouldn't be on the hook, because it's not just a $250,000 that the builder can come after you for; it's the total loss, right? So if they sell it at a loss, they can come after you to recover that cost. But then I noticed the builder had some unsold inventory too, and they were actually selling those homes at a little bit of a reduced price, not a lot. The price was not reduced a lot, but they were actually offering people a lower mortgage rate. And but I think people have to understand that you still have to qualify at the end of 3 years, and if the rates are not down to what you qualified now, you have another problem, right? So, we're all hoping for the best. We're all hoping that the rates will drop, but I don't think you're going to see the rates you've been seeing, like the 2% even in 3 years or even in 5. I think the rates are going to be higher. Maybe not as high as they are right now, but definitely higher. So if it was me, I'd rather take the lower priced home at a higher rate for a shorter period of time, because the math works out a little different, than a higher priced home for just a short period of time on the rates. And I think, you know, people say, hey, you know, what's the difference? But if you do the math has to work out. Anyways, I want to thank you. Seeing that I have no questions, I want to thank you for hanging out with me on this Monday evening at your dinner hour. I so appreciate your time. And if you have a topic you'd like me to unpack further, and you want to be a guest on the show, I'm happy to interview you as well, or I'm happy to have a guest of your choosing on the show as well. My name is Jacqueline Watson, and I'm a realtor with Sutton Group Tower in Toronto. And until next time, we'll talk soon. But thank you again for joining me this evening, and have a fabulous rest of your Monday evening. Bye.